All right, question number 5. We'll start with you, CJ. If your business is going under, what expenses are you cutting off first?
Man, listen, I've been in a position, my students, everybody knows my story. I almost lost my business in 2017. The first thing that I did was I cut my own pay. I talked about this earlier. You got to be a hunter. I cut my own pay. I got back on the phones. I got back belly to belly at the kitchen table with sellers signing contracts. I got back talking to cash buyers. I went back into the trenches with my team to build the business back up to what everybody sees today. So if my business was going under, again, I'd cut my pay. I'd get back in the trenches doing anything I can to help the team, leading by example, and we get back on top just like we did, man. So that's my answer.
All right. Steve Trang, your thoughts?
So we're going through a slowdown right now. You know, we're looking at, Phoenix or Arizona, Nevada, Utah. We seem to be leading the country in how fast we can, drop. So we're going through some pain right now. And so this is probably a little too close to the heart at the moment. So like CJ, we dropped our pay. So I paid myself less. That was one of the first things we did. And right now what we did was we cut back a lot on VA assistance. We're basically asking everyone in the organization to do a little bit more right now through these leaner times. So the first thing we cut a lot of VAs. And we're not alone. I know that we talked to our top VA. She had to take some personal time last week. And we were kind of worried for her. And she basically said she had to take some personal time because so many of her friends and family in the Philippines are getting laid off right now. And she has to be the strong person, the emotional support for all of them. So it doesn't seem like we're alone in letting a lot of our VAs go. And it's sad to do, but, it's something that we needed to do.
Okay. RJ Bates.
The first thing I'm going to cut is my charged up university subscription. Clearly doesn't
buy the $10,000 program. I love it.
No, like Steve said, this topic actually is, too close to home because, we had to do this back in 1920. The main things that we cut was anything that was not revenue generating. And like CJ said, we had to get back in the trenches. That was me doing the 50-50-50. I mean, everyone was gone. All of the systems were down. And it was backs against the wall, make or break time. All day, every day, I'm focused on generating leads and revenue through batch leads. That's what I was doing. And so everything else got cut. So if it wasn't a system that helped us generate revenue, and it's amazing how many subscriptions you can actually have. I joke about charged up, but it's amazing how many thousands of dollars you can have just in subscriptions that you don't use on a regular basis. That's what I looked at. That's what we cut, and we came out better on the other side.
Okay. And Eric Brewer, bring us home.
I think, man, this is a hard question, right? Like when you think about cutting your own pay, that's you talk about the ups and downs and overglorified entrepreneurship. Like in any other circumstance, if your boss came to you and said, I'm going to cut your pay, I've eliminated your administrative VA support, and I want you to work more, how many of those conversations will go over well? As close to zero as possible, right? I encourage people before, because here's oftentimes what happens. And I would venture to say this with Steve, is that the people he let go were underperforming for an extended period of time, and we tolerated it because the market gave us the forgiveness to be able to do it. So what I've realized is most people that come to me and they ask about expenses, the first thing I'd turn them to and go, rather than reducing your expenses, increase your activity. What are you doing now? And I see a lot of people that get into wholesaling 2 years ago. I don't know about you guys, but it took me 10 years to even think I could possibly not be involved in the day-to-day operations. And there's certain people that got in this business 2 years ago that got an integrator or a COO, and they're off the phones and they don't really work. And they're going, where do I cut my expense? I said, don't. Get back to work. Like, go on appointments. Pick up the phone. One of those people, I made him commit, and I was like, listen, don't call me next week and tell me like your numbers are down. Call me and tell me how many appointments you went on, right? I've seen a lot of times, I know everybody here has a different version of virtual versus in person. I think one of the things you got to get back to is belly to belly to sit in front of people. It's harder to buy deals virtually today across all different markets than it was 2 years ago. I think it's less about decreased expenses and more about increased activity.
Okay.
I agreed with everything Eric just said, except because he sucks at closing. That's why he can't close virtually. He has to go in person and like force them to do it because he's a frightening man. Okay? But outside that, that was brilliant, Eric.
There's a lot of things you may be better at than me, and I promise you, closing is not even close to one of them.
I literally just closed the deal on stage in front of 500 people. I cannot believe there's so
Show us the HUD, first of all. Second of all, I wasn't there.
I'd love
So
to
it doesn't
put money
matter.
on this. I'd love to put money
like
on that.
8 days ago, it's in escrow, bro.
Look, RJ, I just want to tell you real quick as a friend, I would pick Eric over you.
Oof.
You are unbelievable.
The best advice you've ever got right here. Save yourself the embarrassment.
Competition, we can,
I'm gonna take the money from RJ's canceled charged up subscription and I'm gonna place it over on Eric Brewer in this situation here.
I'm just saying, if we're making this a wagering situation, I know the perfect platform for it. Don't worry, Steve. I won't take it there. The voting is now open. RJ, CJ, Eric Brewer, Steve, Trang, vote for your favorite opinion on that one. Guys, really quickly, before we get to the voting results and we go on to the audience submitted question, I do want to shout out that this program is sponsored by absolutely nobody yet, but we're still working on it. So be a little patient with us, guys. Got anybody? Just tell them to email us. The host is looking for a little something also. So
yeah, I had to hit the phones yesterday. So to Eric's point, I had to go hit the phones yesterday and start prospecting for sponsors. Man, it's rough.
Real quick, shout out to Steve and his staff. Like, these types of questions are not often talked about. And if you didn't notice the humility that came out, when RJ and CJ and Steve were answering questions about reduced expenses and things like that, I don't know of anywhere where you're going to get this level of transparency from people that have probably experienced in our own little world the lowest lows and have visibly reached the highest highs. So shout outs to Steve and you guys for preparing these questions, and then also kudos to the rest of you fellas for being humble enough to answer those questions open and honestly. I think that there's a lot of people that would shy away from that question or frankly just lie, and it's clear that nobody on this panel did that. So
well, and I appreciate that, Eric, but I also want to point out go back to what you said. I know I cracked a joke there, but you brought up the whole, like, I hired an integrator and a COO and I'm able to step away. Man, that sounds so freaking good. But the more that I meet people like that, the more I see them like 9 months later and like they've aged like a decade and they're like, oh my God, my business is falling apart. And I'm like, yeah, it's because 9 months ago you told me you retired. I know shit, your business fell apart. Like, it blows my mind. So yes, if that were the situation and your business was going under, you inserting yourself back in has to be the first action before you ever think about cutting an expense.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I appreciate those words as well, Eric. Yeah, it's interesting to me how people try to avoid the work of it. Wholesaling to me, anytime somebody tells me they're interested in getting into wholesale, my comment's always the same. It's a labor-intensive business. It's a business that you got to be committed to. It's a business you got to be willing to spend consistent daily time on. You can make a lot of money, but you've got to be willing to really get in it. And so, when I found myself in that position back in 2017, to me, the concept was super simple. It was just like, all right, like I'm the leader here. I've got to show and prove that I stand on what we've built, the concepts and the SOPs and the processes, and where there's gaps, I'll step in and help find those things versus handing it to an operations manager or this, that, and the third. So I think, look, there's a reason that the captain went down with the Titanic, right? Like he wasn't going to go out without giving that that full fight, every effort. And I think that's what you got to be as a leader if something's happening with your business. Wouldn't
you also say that the SOPs that you had and everything like that got a lot better once you got back in it?
Oh yeah, because that's when you find out your gaps. I think a lot of times we hear this, because let's be honest, right? Like a lot of times SOPs are copy and paste. right?
Yep.
You know, you go get to a mastermind, you go to a coaching program, somebody shows you their SOPs and you copy and paste a lot of times. And sometimes manually stepping back through it. I've had to do this multiple times in different businesses that I have, where we've got to go back through every process A to Z, step by step, and redefine consistently over time what those SOPs really look like, because they often change and we forget the little nuances and things we often don't pay attention to.
Or we don't effectively communicate those nuances.
Yeah. And that can be a reflection of us as leaders, right? I've been in that position where things change, the expectations change, or maybe something in the process changes. And, we have this bad habit as leaders sometimes of assuming that people can easily figure it out. And sometimes we got to get in there and lay it out a couple of times so that people can catch on properly.
I think the biggest untold secret, like probably entrepreneurism as a whole, as well as wholesaling, would be, you guys, if I were to ask you, like, hey, what are the 1 or 2 top things you need to be able to do as a wholesaler? What would you say that is?
Source properties.
Marketing and sales, right?
Yep.
Once you make the decision to hire that integrator, COO, even a manager, those no longer become the most important things, right? Like the company still needs to be great at marketing, sales, but your individual contribution as a business owner has absolutely nothing to do with marketing and sales. Now you need to be a trainer, a leader, a coach, a consultant, a shoulder to cry on, an encouraging pat on the back, an innovator, but also you need to buffer that innovation with not bringing back crazy ideas and getting people distracted from. It's the hardest thing I ever did, was to go from being the best salesperson, the best marketer, to now I have 5 or 6 people. Today we have 55 people. And the last thing I need to do is be a good marketer or salesperson. It requires a completely different skill set for me that I'd never invested a dollar or a minute of my time developing the skill set. And overnight, as I started to hire people, it became the number one thing I needed in the business, because all of that stuff in a business has to happen. Just because you disregard it or you're not good at it does not mean that the business doesn't need it. It's just not getting it from you, right? So like the hardest thing that nobody ever talks about is the instant you hire a couple people, your skill set needs to evolve literally overnight. And it's almost 180 degrees of all the shit that you were good at in order to start the business.
Okay. All right. The voting closed, and Eric Brewer has a mic drop moment because he won that round and closed it out. So shout out to Eric Brewer. He's got 2 points on the board. Him and CJ are tied going into the audience submitted question.